My son missed his mother's funeral for a beach vacation. The next day, he stood in the home I built for her, demanding I sell it to fund his penthouse. He thought I was just a broken, grieving old man. He was about to learn that this old builder still knew how to tear things down. If you're listening to this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. It helps to know I'm not alone, because that day, standing by the fresh dirt, I felt completely isolated. The wind was bitter. November in the Northeast always is. It cut right through my heavy coat. But the cold in the air was nothing compared to the ice spreading in my chest. Eleanor, my wife, 45 years together, gone. The funeral service had finished hours ago. Everyone left. They escaped the chill and the silence. I couldn't leave her there alone. Not yet. The darkness was settling in, mirroring the darkness in my soul. My eyes stung. It wasn't just the grief. It was the gaping hole in the small crowd today. A hole the size of my only son. Mark wasn't there. I kept replaying the phone call. My hands shook when I dialed his number that morning. I needed my son. I needed him to be there, to say goodbye to his mother. "Mark, the service is starting soon," I said. My voice was thick, broken. I barely recognized it myself. Silence. Then I heard it, splashing water, distant, upbeat music. The sounds of a party, the sounds of life moving on without us. "Dad." "I told you," Mark said, his voice light, carefree. "We can't make it." "Can't make it?" The words felt wrong, foreign. "Mark, this is your mother's funeral. You have to be here." "I know, Dad. It's awful, really," he said. He didn't sound awful. He sounded bored, distracted. "But it's Sarah's 30th birthday. We booked this Bahamas trip months ago, non-refundable. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, a woman whose ambition was as cold and sharp as a diamond. Her birthday." I leaned against the hallway wall. The world felt unsteady. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "You're choosing a vacation over your mother?" "Don't be dramatic, Dad," Mark sighed. The sound was sharp, dismissive, like I was an unreasonable child. "Mom would have understood. She always said life is for the living." He used her words against me. On the day I buried her, the cruelty of it was breathtaking. "We'll come by when we get back," he continued, oblivious to the devastation he was causing. "Send me pictures of the flowers, okay?" The line went dead. I stood there, the phone cold in my hand. The silence in the house was louder than any scream. I realized I hadn't just lost my wife that day. I had lost my son too, and that realization was a different kind of death, a colder one. The service was a blur. The pastor spoke about Eleanor's kindness, her garden, her fierce love for family. Ironic, wasn't it? I stared straight ahead. I felt the pitying glances. They burned like acid. Everyone knew. Thomas the builder, the man who could fix anything, couldn't fix his own broken family. George, my neighbor and oldest friend, gripped my shoulder. His hand was warm, steady, the only anchor in a sea of grief. He knew what Mark had done. He knew I was drowning. Afterward, back at the house, the air was thick with the smell of lilies and casseroles people had dropped off. I hated it. It smelled like sympathy. It smelled like death. George found me in the kitchen. He poured me a glass of water. I didn't ask for it. My hands were shaking too much to hold the glass steady. "It's a disgrace, Tom," he muttered. His face was red with anger. Anger on my behalf. Eleanor deserved better than that. She deserved the world. "He chose a beach, George," I said. The words tasted like ash. A beach over his own mother. George just shook his head. "It's that wife of his, Sarah. She's got him twisted, Tom, poisoned." I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe my son wasn't this cruel on his own. But deep down, I knew the truth. Mark had always been selfish. Sarah just gave him permission to embrace it. I survived the day. I shook hands. I thanked people. I functioned on autopilot. When the last guest left, the house felt too big, too empty. The silence roared in my ears. I walked through the rooms. Eleanor's knitting basket by her chair, a half-finished scarf, the dent in the drywall from when Mark was 10, and tried to ride his bike indoors. Eleanor had laughed so hard that day. This house was built on memories. My sweat, her love, every nail, every beam. I built this for her. And now it felt like a tomb. I didn't expect to see him the next day. I thought I had a week to grieve, a week before the storm hit. I was wrong. The storm was already here. I was sitting at the kitchen table, bills and sympathy cards stacked high. I hadn't opened any of them. The doorbell rang, sharp, insistent. I opened it, and there he was. Mark. No suitcase. No tan, just him, dressed in expensive jeans and a blazer. He looked like he'd just come from a business meeting, not a tropical vacation. Mark, I stepped back. Confusion hit me first, then a cold, hard anger. I thought you were in the Bahamas. He walked right past me, didn't hug me, didn't even look me in the eye. He tossed his car keys onto the hallway table. They skidded across the polished wood. A careless gesture, a dismissal. Change of plans, he said. His voice clipped. Sarah decided the weather forecast wasn't ideal. We postponed. Postponed. The word hung in the air. Toxic. He hadn't missed the funeral because of a non-refundable trip. He had missed it because the weather might be cloudy. He had simply chosen not to come. And he was here all along. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. It stole the breath from my lungs. The betrayal was deeper than I thought. So you were here, I said. My voice was low, steady, but my heart pounded against my ribs. A frantic drumbeat. You were in the city yesterday, while I buried your mother. Yeah, we were, he said, avoiding my eyes. He walked into the living room, Eleanor's living room. He looked around, not with nostalgia, not with sadness, but like an appraiser, critical, cold, calculating the square footage, assessing the value. He hadn't even mentioned her. No, I'm sorry, Dad. No, how are you holding up? Just straight to business. The business of dismantling my life. Look, Dad, we need to talk. He turned to me. His face was serious. The same face that used to light up when I came home from a job site. Now it was hard, closed off, a mask of indifference. The future, Dad, he said sharply. Your future and ours. Then she appeared. Sarah. I hadn't heard her come in. She moved like a cat, silent, predatory. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her expensive nails tapped impatiently against her sleeve, a rhythmic reminder that her time was valuable. Thomas, she began. Her voice was sharp, like broken glass. This house is too big for you now. It's old, it needs work, and frankly, it's depressing. Depressing. I looked at the walls I had painted myself. Eleanor chose the color. Sunshine yellow. I looked at the fireplace I had built stone by stone, the heart of our home. This is my home, I said. The words were quiet but firm. It's an asset, Dad, Mark cut in. He took a step closer. He smelled like expensive cologne. And right now it's a wasted asset. We have a proposal. They sat down on the sofa. Eleanor's sofa, the one with the floral pattern she loved. They looked so out of place, so cold against the warmth of her memory. They laid out their plan. It was cold, calculated, and breathtakingly cruel. They wanted me to sell the house, immediately. The market is hot right now, Dad, Mark explained. He leaned forward, eager, like he was closing a business deal. We can get a great price, a fantastic price. And you can move into a nice, small apartment, Sarah added. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Something manageable, something appropriate for your age, appropriate for my age. The words stung. A reminder of my mortality. A suggestion that my time was up. And the money? I asked. My voice was hollow. I already knew the answer. I just needed to hear them say it. I needed to see how deep the greed went. Sarah smiled. It was a cold, tight smile. Well, you'll use some for your new place. Of course. But Mark and I have been looking at a new development downtown. A penthouse. It's stunning, Thomas. A penthouse. They wanted a view of the city. A symbol of their success. It's a fantastic investment opportunity, Mark jumped in. But we need the capital from this house to make the down payment. We need the liquidity. They wanted to sell my memories to buy a penthouse. They wanted to dismantle the life Eleanor and I had built, brick by brick, so they could live a life they hadn't earned. And they expected me to agree, just one day, after I buried my wife. A funeral they couldn't be bothered to attend. The silence stretched. I looked at my son. The boy I taught to ride a bike, The boy who used to fall asleep on my chest. The boy I loved more than life itself. No, I said. The word dropped into the room like a stone. Mark blinked, surprised. He wasn't used to hearing that word from me. I had always given him everything. Spoiled him, maybe. Dad, be reasonable, he pleaded, shifting tactics. The concern was fake. The desperation was real. You're rattling around in here. You don't need all this space. This isn't about need, Mark. My voice started to shake, the anger bubbling beneath the surface. This is about respect. This is your mother's legacy. Mark stood up. His face hardened. The mask of concern slipped away, revealing the cold entitlement underneath. He looked so much like me, but his eyes were strangers, cold, empty. Mom is gone, Dad, he shouted. The words echoed in the quiet room, a violation of the sanctity of our home. Her legacy is just wooden bricks. It's property. You're being selfish, clinging to the past when you could be helping your son. Selfish. He called me selfish. I thought of the double shifts, the missed weekends, the years I spent covered in sawdust and paint to put him through college, the business loan I co-signed, the venture that failed spectacularly, the debt I paid off without complaint. My blood ran cold. The grief was turning into something else, something sharp and hot. Rage. Get out, I whispered. The words choked me. Thomas, don't be difficult, Sarah snapped. She stood up too, towering over me, her presence suffocating. We are trying to help you organize your life. You're clearly overwhelmed, not thinking straight. Get out of my house, I roared. The dam finally broke. The grief, the anger, the betrayal, it all came pouring out. The sound ripped through the quiet house. It felt good. It felt powerful. They stared at me, shocked. They weren't used to me fighting back. They thought I was weak, broken. They left. But not without a final threat, a declaration of war. Mark paused at the door. He finally looked me in the eye. His eyes were blazing with resentment. You'll regret this, Dad, he spat. We won't let you squander our inheritance. Our inheritance. The war had begun, and I realized they were prepared to destroy me, to win. The following weeks were a relentless assault, a siege on my sanity. Mark and Sarah didn't give me a moment's peace. They were like vultures, circling, waiting for me to collapse. They called daily, not to check on me, not to ask if I was eating, but to pressure me about the house. The market won't stay this hot forever, Dad. Mark would warn, stay this hot forever, Dad. Mark would warn, his voice urgent. We need to move fast. We're losing money every day you wait. Then Sarah took over the psychological warfare. She started sending me listings for retirement homes. The cheap ones, the ones that looked like prisons, the ones where people went to. This one has a lovely communal dining area. Thomas, she'd say over the phone. Her voice dripped with false sweetness. It made my skin crawl, and it's very affordable. They even have bingo nights. Bingo nights. I was 68, not dead. You wouldn't want to be a burden, would you? She added, the words twisting like a knife in my gut. A burden, that's what I had become to them. An obstacle in the way of their ambition. An old man clinging to his old house. An inconvenience. The pressure intensified. I was trying to grieve, trying to adjust to life without Eleanor's laugh, without her hand in mine. But I was constantly defending myself in my own home. It felt like I was under attack. Then things started getting personal. The betrayals got smaller, sharper, more intimate. One afternoon, I was working in the garden. Eleanor's roses needed tending. It was the only place I felt close to her. The thorns felt comforting, real. I came inside for a glass of water. I heard a noise upstairs. I walked up slowly. The stairs creaked under my weight. I found Mark in my bedroom. Our bedroom. He was going through the closet. Eleanor's closet, invading her privacy. Even in death.
What are you doing? I demanded. My voice shook with rage.
The violation felt physical. He spun around, startled. He was holding it. Eleanor's antique jewelry box. The one I bought her on our first anniversary. It wasn't worth a fortune, but it held pieces I had given her over the years. The pearls from our wedding, the sapphire ring from our 20th anniversary, memories, tangible pieces of our love story. "I am taking these," he said. His voice was defensive, tight. "They should go to Sarah now. It's what Mom would have wanted." "Those were your mother's," I said. I walked toward him, fast. I snatched the box from his hands. It felt heavy, precious. He flinched, like he expected me to hit him. "You don't get to just take them," I snarled. "And you don't get to tell me what your mother would have wanted. You didn't even bother to say goodbye." The words hit their mark. He winced. "I knew her," he argued. His face was flushed, desperate to justify his actions. "You're just hoarding everything, Dad. Why? What's the point? It's all coming to me anyway." There it was, the ugly truth, laid bare, the core of his entitlement. I looked at my son, and I didn't recognize him. The sweet boy who used to help me in the workshop. The teenager who cried for days when his dog died. He was gone, erased. In his place was a man consumed by greed, molded by Sarah's influence. Or maybe this was always who he was, and I just refused to see it. The thought terrified me. "Is that all we were to you, Mark?" I asked. My voice trembled. The anger drained away, leaving only a profound sadness. A gaping wound, a bank account, a collection of assets to be liquidated. He didn't answer. He couldn't even look at me. The silence was his answer, a confession of his guilt. He stormed out. The front door slammed so hard it shook the pictures on the wall. Eleanor smiled, mocking me from the frame. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt cold, hostile. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was menacing. I sat in my workshop, surrounded by the tools of my trade, saws, hammers, levels. I had built things my whole life, houses, furniture, a future, and now it felt like everything was crumbling. The foundation was cracked. I felt weak, old, defeated. I sat on the porch swing. The night air was cold. George came over. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat next to me, the swing creaking rhythmically. "I feel like a failure, George," I admitted. The words were heavy with shame. Where did I go wrong? How did I raise a son who cares more about money than family, than decency? George shook his head slowly. He put his hand on my shoulder, solid, reassuring. "You didn't fail, Tom," he said firmly. "You and Eleanor were wonderful parents. You gave him everything." He paused. His expression darkened. "Mark is an adult. He's making his own choices. But sometimes, Tom, even the best builders use bad wood, and that wood eventually rots." Bad wood, my son. The thought broke my heart. I realized I wasn't just fighting for the house. I was fighting against the reality of who my son had become. And I was losing. The betrayal deep when I discovered the truth about their finances. It happened by accident. I was looking for some insurance documents in the study. Eleanor handled all the paperwork. I was lost without her. I found a bank statement Mark had left behind during one of his unwelcome visits. It was stuffed in a drawer. Maybe he forgot it. Maybe he wanted me to see it, to understand the pressure he was under. I opened it. The numbers swam before my eyes. They were drowning in debt. Credit cards maxed out. A massive personal loan taken out just weeks before Eleanor died. The interest rates were staggering. They didn't just want the house for an investment. They needed it to survive. They had already spent the inheritance they expected to receive. They were counting on Eleanor's death to bail them out. This realization shifted something inside me. It wasn't just greed. It was desperation. And desperate people are dangerous. He was willing to sacrifice me, his own father, to maintain a lifestyle built on lies and leverage. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst was yet to come. A truth so ugly it would shatter what was left of my world. A few days later, I received a phone call. It was Eleanor's sister, Clara. I hadn't spoken to her much since the funeral. She lived across the country. "Thomas, I need to tell you something," Clara said. Her voice was hesitant, trembling slightly. "I didn't want to burden you, but I can't keep quiet. It's eating me alive." "What is it, Clara?" I asked, my stomach tightening, a sense of dread washing over me. Mark came to see Eleanor, she said, about a month before she passed. While she was in the hospital. I was there. I froze. Mark hadn't mentioned visiting his mother. He told me he was too busy with work.
He asked her for money, Thomas, Clara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. A lot of money, he said. He was in trouble, that he needed it for an investment. My blood ran cold. The investment was the penthouse. The trouble was his death. Eleanor refused, Clara continued, her voice trembling with anger. She told him he needed to stand on his own 2 feet, that she wasn't going to enable his reckless spending anymore. Clara paused, taking a shaky breath. He got angry, Thomas. He shouted at her, at his dying mother.
In the hospital room. I closed my eyes. The image was unbearable. He said terrible things, Thomas, Clara sobbed. He said she was selfish, that she was ruining his life, that she cared more about her money than her own son. The nurses had to ask him to leave. He upset her so much. Her heart monitor started going crazy. He had attacked his dying mother for money. The depth of his cruelty was bottomless. I realized then that the rot went deeper than I ever imagined. My son wasn't just selfish. He was monstrous, but the final blow came the next day, a revelation that confirmed my deepest fears. I had to go to the bank. I needed to transfer the accounts into my name. The mundane tasks of grief. I met with Mrs. Peterson, the bank manager. She was a stern woman, always wore dark suits. She had known Eleanor for years. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Thomas," she said, her voice professional but kind. "Eleanor was a wonderful woman. We will miss her." We went through the paperwork, the numbers blurred before my eyes. Then she paused, frowned at the computer screen. "This is odd," she said, adjusting her glasses. "What is it?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "It seems there was an attempt to access the main savings account 2 weeks ago," she said, while Eleanor was still in the hospital. "Shortly after the incident your sister-in-law mentioned." My heart stopped. The blood drained from my face. An attempt? By who? Mrs. Peterson looked uncomfortable. She avoided my eyes. The request was flagged as suspicious. It was made online, using Eleanor's login details, but the security questions were answered incorrectly. She looked at me, her eyes filled with pity, a look I was getting used to. "The IP address was traced back to your son's apartment, Thomas. We also have security footage of him trying to use her ATM card at our downtown branch the same day. Mark tried to steal from his mother while she was dying. He wasn't just waiting for her to die. He was trying to cash in before she was even gone. The air left my lungs. I couldn't breathe. The world tilted on its axis. The ground crumbled beneath my feet. I thanked Mrs. Peterson, my voice robotic. I walked out of the bank. The sunlight felt too bright. The world felt too loud. The noise of the traffic was deafening. I thought I knew the depth of his betrayal. I was wrong. It went deeper than I could have imagined. The son I raised was gone. A monster stood in his place. A monster I had created. The next move they made was audacious, shocking, even for them. It showed me they had no limits. No shame. Sarah showed up unannounced one morning. I was making coffee. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find her standing there. But she wasn't alone. A man stood next to her. Slick suit. Too much cologne. A forced smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Davis, a real estate shark." "Thomas, this is Mr. Davis," Sarah announced, marching into my kitchen without waiting for an invitation. Mr. Davis followed her like a shadow. "He's a real estate agent, the best in the city. He's here to appraise the house." I stared at her. The audacity was staggering. They were treating my home like it was already theirs. Like I was just a tenant they were evicting. "I haven't agreed to sell," I said firmly. I put my coffee cup down. My hand was steady. The shock had hardened into something else. Something cold and sharp. "We know, but we need to be prepared," Sarah said. She looked around the kitchen with distaste. The kitchen Eleanor loved. The kitchen where we shared countless meals. "This decor is so dated, we'll need to gut the whole place." The kitchen is tragic. Tragic. The word hung in the air. Ugly. Cruel. They walked through the house, like they owned it, criticizing everything Eleanor had chosen. The wallpaper, the curtains, the antique furniture we had lovingly restored. "This cabinet has to go," Sarah said, pointing to the hutch I had built for Eleanor as a wedding gift. Solid oak, hours of work. My masterpiece. "It's too bulky, too dark." Mr. Davis nodded eagerly, taking notes on his clipboard. "Absolutely. It ruins the flow. We need light. Modern. Minimalist." They were erasing her, erasing us, piece by piece. "That's enough," I interrupted. My voice was cold, deadly quiet. The sound surprised even me. Sarah turned to me. Her eyes flashed with irritation. She wasn't used to being challenged. "Look, Thomas, we are tired of waiting. Mark is your only son. This is his birthright. Stop being so sentimental and let us move on with our lives." She took a step closer. Her perfume was suffocating. Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "It's like you want to keep Eleanor alive just to spite us. To punish us for being happy. Get over it. She's dead." And there it was, the truth laid bare. The depth of her cruelty, the emptiness of her soul. It wasn't just about the money. It was about control. They wanted to erase Eleanor. They wanted to erase the life we had built, the values we stood for. Kindness, compassion, hard work. My sentimentality, my grief, my love for my wife. It was an inconvenience to them, a weakness to be exploited. They saw my life's work as something to be gutted and replaced with something cold, modern, and empty. Just like them, that was the moment the grief turned into something else. Something colder, harder, resolve. I realized I couldn't save my relationship with Mark. He had made his choice. The boy I loved was gone. The man standing in front of me was a stranger, a dangerous stranger. But I could save Eleanor's legacy. I could ensure that the values she lived by would endure, and I knew exactly how I was going to do it. It was time to fight back. It was time to protect what mattered. If this story is hitting close to home, if you felt the sting of betrayal, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe. It helps us share these stories and remind others that they are stronger than they think. I certainly needed that reminder. I knew I needed help. I couldn't fight this battle alone. They had shown they would stop at nothing. I needed protection. Legal protection. I called David, our family lawyer. David had known Eleanor for years. He drafted our wills. He celebrated our anniversaries. He was a good man. A fair man. An honest man. "David, I need your help," I said. My voice was steady now. The shaking had stopped. The fear had receded, replaced by a cold determination. "I want to change my will, and I need to do it quietly." David didn't hesitate. "I'm here, Thomas. Whatever you need." I was worried about you. I spent the next few days meeting with David in secret in his office downtown, away from the prying eyes of Mark and Sarah. The office smelled of old paper and leather, a comforting smell, the smell of stability. I told him everything: the missed funeral, the Bahamas lie, the demand for the house, the debts, the attempt to take the jewelry, Sarah's cruel words, and then I told him the rest. Clara's revelation about the hospital incident, the harassment of his dying mother, the attempted theft from the bank account, confirmed by Mrs. Peterson, the security footage. David listened patiently. His face grew increasingly grim. He took notes, detailed notes. He asked for the bank statements, the contact information for Clara and Mrs. Peterson. "They are vultures, Thomas," he said finally. He leaned back in his chair. His expression was one of disgust. "They are preying on you in your most vulnerable moment. It's textbook financial abuse. An attempted grand theft." "I know," I said, "and I won't let them have it. I won't let them destroy everything Eleanor stood for. I won't let them profit from her death." "So, what do you want to do?" David asked, leaning forward, ready for battle. I laid out my plan. It was radical, a final step that I knew would sever the last ties with my son. But those ties were already broken. I was just finally admitting it. I was finally letting go. "Are you sure about this, Thomas?" David asked. His voice was gentle. This is a big decision. There will be consequences. They will fight this. It will get ugly. I thought about Eleanor, her strength, her unwavering belief in doing the right thing, her fierce love, her compassion for those who suffered. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I said. We drafted the documents. David was thorough, meticulous. He made sure the plan was airtight, ironclad. We documented everything, the bank statements, Mrs. Peterson's testimony, Clara's sworn affidavit, the security footage from the bank. We built a case, a fortress around my decision. Once everything was in place, the durst established, the documents signed and witnessed, I felt a strange sense of peace, calm before the final storm. The calm of a man who knows he is doing the right thing. I called Mark. All right, Mark, I said. My voice was weary. I played the part of the defeated old man, the role they expected me to play. You win. I'm too old to fight. I've decided to sell the house. The relief in his voice was audible, sickening. That's great, Dad. I knew you'd see sense. Sarah and I are so happy. You're doing the right thing. They hadn't wasted any time. Their greed was efficient. We've already contacted the developers downtown. He continued eagerly. They're ready to move forward with the penthouse. We signed the preliminary agreement. Good, I said. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. I need you and Sarah to meet me at David's office tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. We need to sign the paperwork to finalize the arrangements, to organize the transfer of funds. We'll be there, he promised, his voice buzzing with excitement. Thank you, Dad. You won't regret this. I hung up the phone. My heart was heavy. I already regretted it. I regretted that it had come to this. I regretted that I had raised a son capable of such cruelty. I regretted the loss of the boy I loved. But I didn't regret my decision. It was time to tear things down, to demolish the lies, and build something better in their place. The next morning, I walked into David's office. The air was thick with anticipation. It crackled with unspoken tension. Mark and Sarah were already there, seated at the large mahogany table. They looked triumphant, smug, barely able to contain their excitement. They were dressed in their best clothes, like they were attending a celebration, a victory party. Good morning, Dad, Mark greeted me, a wide smile plastered on his face. The first genuine smile I had seen from him in weeks, a smile fueled by greed. Ready to make this official? Good morning, Thomas, Sarah added, her eyes gleaming. She looked at me like I was a problem that had finally been solved. An obstacle removed. You made the right decision. This is best for everyone. I sat down opposite them, my hands folded on the table. I rubbed my wedding ring, for strength. For Eleanor, I looked at my son, one last time, trying to find a trace of the boy I raised. There was nothing, just a hollow shell. David sat at the head of the table, a stack of documents in front of him. He looked calm, professional, neutral, a silent warrior. We are here today to discuss the sale of Thomas's property and the distribution of the proceeds, David began. His voice was measured. Even Mark and Sarah nodded eagerly. Mark was already reaching for a pen, his hand trembling slightly with anticipation. Thomas has finalized his decision, David continued. He slid a document towards me. He is indeed selling the house. Mark grinned. He picked up the pen, ready to sign whatever was put in front of him, ready to claim his prize, his birthright. However, David said. He raised a hand to stop him. The word hung in the air. A turning point, a sudden shift in the atmosphere. There has been a change in how the funds will be allocated. Mark paused, the pen hovering over the paper, confusion clouding his face. The smile faltered. What do you mean a change? We agreed. The money goes towards our new penthouse. We have the transfer details right here. He pulled out a piece of paper, the details of their dream home, their stolen future, their ill-gotten gains. I took a deep breath. I looked my son straight in the eye. For the first time in weeks, I saw him clearly. The greed, the entitlement, the emptiness. No, Mark, we didn't agree, I said. My voice was strong, clear, the weariness gone. You demanded, and I listened. But I realized something over the past few weeks. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. Heavy, oppressive, the tension tightening like a vise. Your mother built this family on love, compassion, and generosity, I continued. She was the kindest person I ever knew. You, however, have shown none of those qualities. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Sarah glared at me, her eyes narrowing. You prioritized a birthday party over her funeral, I said, the words hitting their mark. You treated her memory like a yard sale. You saw my grief as an opportunity for profit. Mark's face flushed with anger, the mask slipping. Dad, don't do this. Not now. We need that money. We're in debt. The admission slipped out. The desperation finally revealed, the ugly truth exposed. I know about your debts, I said quietly. I know you spent money you didn't have, expecting your inheritance to bail you out. I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering, and I know you harassed your mother in the hospital. I know you shouted at her, demanded money from her while she was dying. Mark went pale, his eyes wide with shock. He looked at Sarah, panic flickering in his gaze. And I know you tried to access her bank account. I continued, my voice cold. We have the security footage, Mark. We have the proof. Sarah gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes darting between Mark and David, the realization dawning on her. They had been caught. That's not how life works, Mark, I said. You don't get to cash out on a life you didn't respect. You don't get to profit from a mother you abandoned and tried to steal from. So what are you doing? Sarah demanded. Her voice was sharp, shrill, fear creeping into her tone, the control slipping from her grasp. Where is the money going? If you think you can cut us out. I turned to David. He nodded. He opened the thickest file. The trust document, the culmination of our work. Thomas has decided to honor his late wife in a way that truly reflects her spirit, David explained. He laid the document on the table. The proceeds from the sale of the house, along with the entirety of his remaining assets, are being placed into a charitable trust. Mark and Sarah stared blankly. They didn't understand. The concept of charity was foreign to them. A charitable trust? Mark repeated. The words sounded hollow. Yes, David confirmed. The Eleanor Foundation, the funds will be used to build and maintain a new wing at the local women's shelter, a place for women and children escaping abuse. A true home for those who need it. Eleanor had volunteered there for years. It was her passion, her calling, her true legacy. The silence in the room was absolute. Mark and Sarah looked as if they had been turned to stone, their faces pale, their greed turning to dust, their future evaporating before their eyes. You're giving it all away? Sarah whispered. Her face was ashen. Her hands trembled. Everything? You can't do that. I'm investing it in something meaningful, I corrected her. Something your mother would have been proud of. Something that actually helps people. Something that lasts. And regarding Mark, David continued, he slid another document forward. The revised will. The final nail in the coffin. Thomas has revised his will. Mark, you have been officially disinherited. You will receive nothing. Mark finally erupted. He jumped to his feet. His chair scraped loudly against the floor, the sound echoing in the quiet office. You can't do this, he roared. His face was red, contorted with rage. A childish tantrum. That's my money, my inheritance. I earned it. You earned nothing, Mark, I said. I stood up to face him. I was surprised to find I was still taller than him, stronger. It's my money, money I earned with my own two hands, my sweat, my blood, and I choose how to spend it. I looked at him, the stranger wearing my son's face. You made your choice when you abandoned your mother, when you abandoned me. Now you have to live with the consequences. We'll sue you, Sarah shrieked, her composure finally breaking. The mask of sophistication shattered. Her voice was shrill, desperate. We'll fight this in court. We'll have you declared incompetent. You're old. You're confused. You can try, David said calmly. He closed the file. But the trust is airtight. Thomas is of sound mind, and the documents are legally binding. We have documented your harassment, the financial abuse, and the attempted theft. In fact, we are considering pressing charges for the attempted grand theft. The threat hung in the air, real palpable. Sarah went silent. The fight drained out of her, replaced by fear. Mark stared at me, his eyes filled with rage and disbelief. But beneath the anger, I saw something else. The realization that their carefully constructed world was collapsing around them. The realization that they had lost everything. "How could you do this to me?" he whispered. The arrogance gone, replaced by a pathetic plea. "I'm your son." "Are you?" I asked. The words were heavy with sorrow. The grief for the son I lost deeper than any other. A son honors his parents. A son shows compassion and loyalty. You showed me nothing but greed and entitlement. I looked at the stranger in front of me. "You broke my heart, Mark, but you won't break my spirit." I picked up the pen. My hand was steady. I signed the documents. With each stroke, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders, the burden of their expectations, the pain of their betrayal. I was free. Mark and Sarah stormed out of the office. They left a trail of threats and curses in their wake. The door slammed shut behind them, the sound of a chapter closing. I never saw them again. The fallout was swift and merciless. Without the expected inheritance, their debts consumed them. They lost the deposit on the penthouse. The developers sued them for breach of contract. They lost their expensive apartment. Their cars were repossessed. Their shallow social standing evaporated. They were exposed as the frauds they were. I heard rumors from George, who heard them through the grapevine, that they moved away, far away, forced to start over with nothing. They finally had to face the reality of living within their means. It was a hard lesson, but a necessary one. A lesson I should have taught Mark years ago. I sold the house. It was painful, leaving the place where Eleanor and I had shared so many memories. Every room held a ghost, a laugh, a touch, a whisper of love. The day I moved out, I walked through the empty room. The echoes of our life together lingered in the air. I touched the walls, the fireplace, the hutch I built for her, but I realized that the home wasn't the walls or the bricks. It wasn't the wood or the stone. It was the love we shared, and that love lived on in me. The house was just a shell, a beautiful shell, but a shell nonetheless. I moved into a small apartment near the center of town. It was quiet, manageable, peaceful. I finally had space to grieve and to heal. I started rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy. Grief is a strange companion. It comes in waves, sometimes threatening to drown you, but I learned to ride them. I learned to float. I spent my days volunteering, reading, spending time with friends like George. Friends who reminded me what true family felt. Loyalty, support, unconditional love. A year later, the Eleanor Foundation opened the new wing at the women's shelter. I was invited to the opening ceremony. I met Maria, the shelter director. She was a warm, dedicated woman whose passion mirrored Eleanor's. She hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Thomas," she whispered, her eyes shining with tears. "Your generosity has changed lives. You have given these families hope, a future." It was a beautiful building, bright, welcoming, safe, filled with light, a stark contrast to the darkness Mark and Sarah had brought into my life. I walked through the halls. I saw the rooms filled with beds, the kitchen stocked with food, the playroom filled with toys. I saw women and children who had known fear and pain, now finding safety and hope, a fresh start. I stood in the garden. They had planted roses. Eleanor would have loved that. The sun was shining. A warm breeze rustled the leaves. The sound of children's laughter echoed around me. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard, a sound of life, of resilience. I held a small photograph of Eleanor, her smiling face, her kind eyes. "We did it, Eleanor," I whispered. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of joy, of release, of gratitude. We built something that lasts. I had lost my son. It was a wound that would never fully heal, a scar I would carry forever, but I had found my purpose. I had honored my wife, not with empty words or expensive flowers, but with actions that reflected the beauty of her soul, her kindness, her compassion. In the end, I realized that legacy isn't about what you leave behind for your children. It's not about money or property. It's about the values you instill in the world. It's about the love you share, the kindness you show, the impact you have on the lives of others. And as I stood there watching a little girl plant a rosebush in the garden, her face bright with hope, I knew that Eleanor's legacy would bloom forever. Thanks for listening to my story. If it moved you, please rate it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. Your support means the world, because your time matters.